Did you know that this Koenigsegg has the same engine as every cab in New York? Or did you know that Pagani uses a Mercedes engine in their all-time greatest and most iconic car ever? Keep watching to find out which top cars share the same engine as regular cars. Who would have thought that the car as remarkable as the Koenigsegg CC8S would have the exact same engine as the NYPD patrol cars and famous New York cabs, huh? Well, back in the 90s, when Koenigsegg was just getting started, they didn't have the budget to develop an engine of their own, so they ended up borrowing the modular V8 engine used in Ford Crown Victoria models and fitting it into their CC8S model. Even though the engine in the Crown Victoria was developed to produce a maximum of 220 horsepower and 460 Nm of torque, Koenigsegg made some slight changes to it, turbocharged it, and increased its output to a total of 655 horsepower and 750 Nm of torque. While that may not seem like a lot of power by today's standards, considering the car's racing aerodynamics, it allowed it to reach speeds of up to 240 miles per hour. Speaking of race cars, I ain't going nowhere without mentioning the Ultima GTR. Did you know that this race car shares the same engine as your dad's Chevy Tahoe? I still can't wrap my head around it. In fact, the Ultima GTR is equipped with the 6.3-liter Chevrolet small block V8 engine, which produces a stunning 535 horsepower. Compared to the Tahoe, that's an increase of 180 horsepower. As far as I know, the Ultima GTR held the title of the world's quickest accelerating and decelerating supercar for a very long time. It completed the Top Gear test lap 6.2 seconds faster than the Ferrari Enzo and 4 seconds faster than the Bugatti Veyron SS. The Lotus Evora is another car model that uses an engine from a popular, though controversial car, the Toyota Camry. Even though the Camry is far from a sports car, somehow its engine found its way into the Evora. Back in the day, Lotus, like many British car manufacturers, had a problem with poor engine reliability. To solve this issue, they turned to Toyota, a company well known for its reliable engines. Lotus eventually fitted the 2GR FE engine and a 3.5-liter V6 engine into the Evora. With slight adjustments and the addition of a supercharger, they managed to increase the power output to 400 horsepower and 300 Nm of torque. Not many people know this, but the iconic Nissan 350oZ, still one of the most beloved car among enthusiasts, shares its engine with some fairly odd and distinct vehicles. When the 350Z debuted in 2003, it became an instant hit with its newly introduced VQ35DE engine, which produced 290 horsepower and drove the rear wheels only. However, Nissan wasn't the only one offering that engine. Renault also equipped their E-Space and Laguna models with the exact same 3.5-liter V6 engine. Who would have thought that the 350Z would share the same engine with an unconventional vehicle like the Renault E-Space? Very weird. I myself am an Audi fanboy and know quite a bit about Audis, but did you know that the second generation of S8s packed the same V10 engine as the Lamborghini Gallardo? That's exactly true, and I've just learned that. The slight difference between the two is that the S8 has a slightly detuned version of the engine for better fuel economy, but it still produces 444 horsepower and has a displacement of 5.2 liters. In contrast, the Gallardo's engine puts out close to 500 horsepower but has a slightly smaller displacement of 5 liters since the chassis could not handle more. I guess the S8 is quite a beast. The BMW i8 and the Mini Hatch are also two very distinct cars that share the same engine. In 2014, when the i8 debuted, it made headlines worldwide, borrowing the 1.5-liter 3-cylinder engine from Mini and incorporating additional electric motors. It became the perfect hybrid sports car with minimal fuel consumption. It produced 228 horsepower and 320 nanometers of torque, accelerated to 100 kilometers an hour in just 4.4 seconds. Sadly, the i8 never met expectations and met an early demise, while the Mini Hatch continues to live to this day. The Volvo XC90 is another SUV that shares its engine with a car considered a supercar. While it may seem odd to take an old engine from a non-sports vehicle and try to make it into a sports car, the British manufacturer Noble successfully executed something like this with one of their cars. The Noble M600 carries the same 4.4-liter V8 engine as the XC90, but unlike the 315 horsepower engine in the Volvo, the M600 is turbocharged and slightly tuned, producing a whopping 650 horsepower. It reaches a speed of 225 miles per hour and has a redline of 7,000 RPM. When looking at the most iconic cars in the industry, people might assume that they all have specially designed engines. However, there is a certain legendary supercar that uses a BMW engine. the McLaren F1. During the early days of constructing the car, McLaren decided to borrow an engine from an 80s luxury sedan, heavily modify it, and create a hypercar that broke world records. The F1 is equipped with a 6.1-liter V12 engine that can produce a staggering 630 horsepower, and held the title for the fastest production car from 1992 to 2005. Today, this magnificent piece can be purchased for $2.5 million. But if you want to drive a BMW with the same engine as the McLaren F1, you can look for the 1980 BMW 750i and find one for just a couple of $1,000 on the used car market. While it's quite common for car companies to share parts or even entire engines for their cars, it's rare to find hypercars with engines from ordinary cars. Similar to the McLaren F1, the Pagani Zonda is another example of an iconic multi-million-dollar car fitted with an ordinary engine from a Mercedes-Benz S600. The V12 engine in the Benz ran smoothly and quietly, just like a proper luxury sedan. However, when that exact same engine was placed in the Zonda, it transformed the car into a screaming monster. With the engine heavily tuned to 450 horsepower, the car could reach 0 to 60 in just 2.7 seconds, and had a record-breaking top speed of 375 kilometers an hour. Today, if you want to acquire a Zonda for yourself, make sure you have $1 million or $2 ready, as that's the starting price for the cheapest one on the market. There you have it, folks. Those were our top picks for today. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.